The lights never change. That is the first thing a new crew member notices, and it is the thing that never stops being disorienting. Aboard a ballistic missile submarine on patrol, there is no sunrise filtering through a porthole, no evening darkening of the sky, no natural variation in light that the human nervous system has relied upon for hundreds of thousands of years to tell it when to sleep, when to be alert, when the day is ending and the body can finally release the tension it has been holding. There is only the flat, constant fluorescent white of a submarine at depth, running silent somewhere in an ocean whose surface the crew has not seen in weeks. The Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine is the most destructive object ever built by human hands. One boat, at full loadout, carries 24 Trident II D5 ballistic missiles. Each missile can carry up to 8 independently targeted warheads. Each warhead carries a yield of approximately 100 kilotons, 6.5 times the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. The arithmetic is not complicated. A single Ohio-class submarine, if ever ordered to launch, can erase 192 individual targets from existence in approximately 30 minutes. 155 people live inside it, for 70 days at a time, in a pressure hull 560 feet long and 42 feet wide, submerged, silent, moving slowly through water so cold and dark that the ocean floor 2 miles below them receives less sunlight than the surface of Mars. This is not a story about nuclear weapons strategy. It is a story about what happens to human beings, their bodies, their minds, their sense of time and reality, when they volunteer to live inside a machine like this. The first thing that strikes anyone who boards an Ohio-class submarine for the first time is not the technology. It is the space, or rather, the absolute absence of it. A 560-foot submarine sounds large until you understand that the pressure hull, the actual habitable cylinder where the crew lives and works, is 42 feet in diameter, and most of that diameter is occupied by machinery, systems, pipelines, cable runs, and weapons. The spaces where human beings actually exist are the margins left over after the engineering has taken everything it needs. The crew berthing compartments are tiered 3 high, each rack approximately the length of the occupant's body plus 6 inches. The width allows a sleeping sailor to lie on their back, but not to roll comfortably onto their side without pressing against the rack above. A thin curtain provides the only privacy a crew member will have from their colleagues for the next 70 days. Behind the curtain, a small reading light, a ventilation nozzle, and whatever personal items fit in a storage space, roughly the size of a desk drawer. The boat runs on 3 rotating watch sections. One section is on watch, one is sleeping, one is eating, performing maintenance, studying qualification materials, or trying to decompress in whatever limited way the submarine allows. This means that at any given time, 1/3 of the crew is in their rack, and the rack behind the next curtain is likely occupied by someone from a different watch section who is trying to sleep through whatever the occupants of the surrounding racks are doing. This is called hot racking on some boats, not universal on Ohio-class, which has enough berths for its full crew complement, but the principle of constant occupation applies regardless. The berthing spaces are never empty. The smell of a submarine berthing compartment after 4 weeks at sea is something that experienced submariners describe with a resigned combination of dark humor and genuine distaste. Recycled air, industrial lubricants, cooked food, and 155 people who have access to showers on a schedule measured in days rather than mornings. The galley, the submarine's kitchen and primary social space, is the closest thing to a community center that the boat offers. Meals are taken in shifts, the tables occupied and vacated in rapid rotation to move through the entire crew. The food quality on an Ohio-class submarine is by any reasonable standard genuinely good. The Navy has long understood that food is the primary lever of morale in a submerged environment where every other human pleasure has been removed. And the culinary specialists aboard a ballistic missile submarine take their work seriously. A good meal at the right moment is not a minor thing when it is one of 4 or 5 positive sensory experiences available to you in a given 24-hour period. But even good food has limits as a coping mechanism when the 24-hour period it anchors has become almost impossible to distinguish from the 24-hour period before it. The mechanical environment of an Ohio-class submarine generates its own kind of psychological pressure, distinct from the social compression of the living spaces. The nuclear propulsion plant at the boat's stern is the reason the submarine can maintain patrol for 70 days without surfacing. An S-8G pressurized water reactor, a direct descendant of the naval nuclear propulsion technology Admiral Hyman Rickover, spent 3 decades developing and refining, heats a primary coolant loop, transfers that energy through steam generators to a secondary loop, drives turbines, and ultimately turns the submarine's single large-diameter propeller through a complex of reduction gears and shaft systems designed to operate with the minimum possible acoustic output. The reactor does not make noise in the conventional sense. What it makes is presence, a persistent subsonic vibration that travels through the hull structure and into anything in contact with it: deck plates, equipment housings, the frames of sleeping racks. It is not loud enough to prevent sleep. It is constant enough that it becomes part of the background of consciousness, a physical reminder that the machine is working, that the boat is alive and moving, that the water outside is cold and pressurized, and that the only thing between the crew and the ocean floor is the integrity of the hull and the continuous functioning of several hundred interdependent systems. When that vibration changes, when a pump shifts its rhythm, when a valve cycles at an unexpected time, when something in the propulsion spaces makes a noise that does not belong in the pattern the experienced crew has memorized, everyone notices, not with alarm, usually, with the specific, sharpened attention of people who understand that their survival is directly connected to the mechanical health of the machine they are living inside. The noise management culture aboard a ballistic missile submarine is unlike anything in surface naval operations. The entire strategic value of the Ohio-class depends on its undetectability. If the submarine can be found, it can be targeted. If it can be targeted, it provides no deterrent value. If it provides no deterrent value, the 155 people aboard it and the 24 missiles it carries contribute nothing to the nuclear posture that justifies their existence and their deployment. This means that everything aboard a ballistic missile submarine is evaluated through the lens of acoustic signature. Tools are set down gently. Machinery is isolated from the hull on rubber mounts. Conversations in areas near the pressure hull are kept low. The engineering culture that has developed around these requirements over 6 decades of American submarine operation is extraordinarily refined. And it begins to shape the behavior of crew members in ways that persist when they return to shore, where the habit of moving quietly and speaking softly in professional spaces does not immediately disappear. The mechanical complexity of the Ohio-class creates a maintenance burden that the 155-person crew carries continuously. The submarine has no dry dock capability at sea, no external technical representatives, no ability to order a replacement part that arrives by morning. Everything that breaks, degrades, or operates outside specification must be repaired by the crew using the parts and tools carried aboard, in spaces so tight that some maintenance tasks require removing 3 other components to access the one that needs attention, and then reinstalling everything in reverse order in a space lit by a portable work light, held by someone whose primary job is something else entirely. Qualification aboard an Ohio-class submarine means demonstrating a working knowledge of every major system on the boat, not just the systems relevant to your specific rate and role. A torpedoman must understand the reactor plant well enough to take basic actions if the engineering watch requires assistance. A sonar technician must understand the fire control system. A nuclear-trained reactor operator must understand the weapons systems that give the boat its mission. This cross-training is not bureaucratic box-checking. It is a survival requirement rooted in the reality that in a crisis, the person physically closest to a failing system may not be the person with formal training on it. The qualification process takes months. New crew members spend their off-watch hours studying system documentation, walking equipment spaces to learn the physical location and function of every valve, breaker, and control, and demonstrating their knowledge to qualified reviewers in formal oral boards that are taken seriously enough to delay the issuing of a submarine warfare qualification pin, colloquially called dolphins, for crew members who cannot meet the standard. Earning dolphins is not merely ceremonial. It is the submarine force's way of ensuring that every person aboard understands the machine they are living inside at a level sufficient to keep it alive in an emergency. And the emergency scenarios that submarine crews drill against are not abstract. They include flooding, fire, reactor casualty, loss of propulsion, loss of depth control, and weapons system malfunction, any one of which, handled incorrectly, ends the patrol permanently. The maintenance schedule runs continuously. There is no day off from the systems that keep the submarine operational and the crew alive. Routine checks happen on intervals measured in hours. Planned maintenance actions are sequenced across the 70-day patrol to distribute workload. Unplanned corrective maintenance gets absorbed into whatever margin remains after the planned work is done, which, toward the end of a long patrol, is a margin that has been thinning steadily for weeks. Fatigue is the variable that no maintenance manual can fully account for. By the 5th week of a patrol, the crew members who started the deployment with sharp attention and full physical reserves are operating on reserves that have been partially depleted. The watch schedule does not change because the calendar reached day 35. The reactor plant does not become less demanding because the engineering watch team has been awake for 4 hours in the middle of what their bodies insist is the middle of the night. Regardless of what the ship's clock says, the combat vulnerability of a ballistic missile submarine is both lower and higher than most people outside the submarine community understand. Lower, because detection is genuinely difficult. The acoustic quieting technology on an Ohio-class submarine represents the accumulated investment of 7 decades of American submarine engineering. The anechoic tile coating on the outer hull absorbs active sonar pulses rather than reflecting them. The internal noise isolation systems, the rubber mounts, the isolated deck sections, the carefully managed machinery cycling, reduce the submarine's passive acoustic signature to levels that place it at the technical edge of detectability, even by the most capable contemporary anti-submarine systems. An Ohio class at quiet ship conditions, running at low speed at operational depth, is an extraordinarily difficult detection problem. Higher, because the consequences of detection are unlike anything in surface warfare. A surface ship that is found by an adversary exists in an engagement where warning is possible, defensive maneuver is possible, countermeasures are deployable, and survival, even after being hit, is at least theoretically achievable. A submarine that is found and engaged at depth has no equivalent options. The physical environment removes them. A torpedo hit on a pressure hull at depth is not a damage control problem. It is a catastrophic structural event in an environment where the pressure differential between inside the hull and outside it is measured in hundreds of atmospheres. The crew of an Ohio-class submarine lives, at all times, with the knowledge that their survivability depends entirely on not being found. Not being found depends on quiet, on careful navigation routing, on communication discipline, and on the competence of the sonar team, whose job is to detect any threat before it detects them. This is not a stressful psychological environment in the acute sense. Experienced submarine crews habituate to the intellectual understanding of their vulnerability, the same way a commercial airline crew habituates to the awareness that they are flying 6 miles above ground. The rational brain files it and moves on, but the body keeps its own accounts. The cardiovascular data from submariners on long patrols shows elevated chronic stress markers that do not match the crew members' self-reported stress levels. The immune system operates differently in the recycled air environment. Sleep architecture changes over the course of a long patrol in ways that affect cognitive performance even when the crew member reports feeling adequately rested. The machine is survivable. The machine is not, over time, neutral. The weapons that give the Ohio class its strategic purpose occupy a space in the hull that the crew passes through, maintains, and lives adjacent to for 70 days, and which very few people outside the submarine community ever fully process. The missile compartment is the largest single space on the boat. 2 rows of 12 missile tubes, each tube 44 inches in diameter and extending through multiple deck levels, dominate the midship section of the submarine. The tubes are closed, sealed, and maintained under conditions designed to ensure their readiness for a launch order that the crew sincerely hopes will never come. The Trident II D5 missile is not maintained in an armed condition during normal patrol. The actual nuclear warhead arming sequence requires a series of authenticated commands and physical actions that are procedurally and physically separated to prevent any single individual from initiating a launch. The 2-person rule, no single crew member can take any step in the weapons release sequence alone, applies to every stage of the process, and is enforced through both procedure and physical design of the systems involved. Despite all of this, walking through the missile compartment is a specific kind of experience. The tubes are not threatening in their appearance. They are mechanical, clinical, painted gray, labeled with the same alphanumeric nomenclature as any other equipment on the submarine. But the understanding of what they contain, the physics and the geography of what a single tube's contents can do to a city the crew has never visited and whose inhabitants have no idea this submarine exists, is present for every crew member who passes through that space. Most experienced submariners describe processing this knowledge by setting it in a rational framework, assigning it to the category of things that are true but not immediately relevant, and focusing on the technical and interpersonal realities of the day. The human mind is remarkably good at compartmentalizing. The submarine community has, over 6 decades, developed an institutional culture that treats this compartmentalization as a professional norm. What is publicly known is that submarine crews have among the highest retention rates and strongest internal professional identity of any community in the American military. The people who volunteer for this, and who stay, have found something in the machine, or in themselves, that makes the 70 days bearable. More than bearable for many. The operational philosophy that produces and sustains a ballistic missile submarine crew is the oldest and most demanding in American military service. Deterrence through presence. The Ohio-class does not patrol to fight. It patrols to exist, or rather, to exist in a condition of concealed readiness, whose very concealment is the mechanism of its strategic value. An enemy who cannot locate the submarine cannot destroy it in a first strike. An enemy who cannot destroy it in a first strike cannot prevent its retaliatory launch. An enemy who cannot prevent the retaliatory launch has no rational incentive to initiate the first strike. The logic is circular, self-reinforcing, and has arguably constituted the most stable strategic deterrence architecture in human history for the better part of 6 decades. 155 people sustain that logic, personally and physically, by going underwater and staying there. They are not warriors in the conventional sense. They fire no weapons in training. They engage no adversary. They move through patrol areas that their mission requires them never to identify, at speeds and depths that their mission requires them never to disclose, carrying weapons they are trained to use, and that their mission requires them to hope they are never ordered to deploy. They come home after 70 days to a pier where their families have been waiting, to children who are a year older than their accumulated memories of them, to a sunlight that takes several days to stop feeling aggressive, to eyes adapted to fluorescent white. They debrief, they decompress, they take leave, and then, after a rotation period that is never quite long enough, they go back. The question that stays with anyone who thinks seriously about what these crews do and what they carry is not whether the machine works. The Ohio-class is demonstrably, provably, one of the most reliable and capable weapons platforms in military history. The question is simpler and harder than engineering. Can a human being do this indefinitely? Not the 7th-day deployment, the career, the repeated disappearances, the accumulated patrol days, the years of living in a machine that is simultaneously a professional community, a weapons system, an engineering challenge, and a psychological environment unlike anything outside of it. The answer the submarine force gives, implicitly, every time a crew walks down that pier and through that hatch is yes. The answer their bodies sometimes give in the data that medical researchers study and that the Navy monitors carefully is more complicated. The machine works. Whether the machine is survivable, in the long, full human sense of that word, is the question that no technical manual addresses, and that every crew member answers privately, for themselves, somewhere around day 45. If you found yourself thinking about what it would take to do this, to volunteer for this, to go back after the first patrol, leave that in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether the deterrence logic makes it feel like something worth doing, or whether the human cost is something the strategic argument never fully accounts for. Thanks for watching.